immediately claims central real estate, setting the stage for a dynamic pawn battle and potential queenside expansion. Developing the knight to a flexible square immediately challenges white's central control, promising a dynamic game ahead. Securing central space and preparing to build a pawn chain, white boldly stakes a claim in the early game. Embracing the fianchetto, black signals a long-term kingside development, preparing to unleash a powerful bishop from its flank. Developing the knight to c3 reinforces the central pawn push and prepares for an active kingside defense. Unleashing the bishop prepares to challenge white's central pawn structure and potentially open diagonals for future activity. Seizing the center with this pawn advance prepares a powerful kingside initiative and restricts black's developing pieces. Solidifying the center and preparing to develop the queenside, this pawn thrust immediately challenges white's ambitious pawn phalanx. Solidifying the center pawn chain, this move commits white's structure, potentially preparing kingside expansion but limiting king's safety. Fortifying the king's sanctuary is a prudent step, securing its immediate safety amidst white's solid pawn structure. Solidifying the pawn center, this develops a piece, supporting the e-pawn and preparing kingside castling while eyeing the d5 square for potential future play. Challenging white's central grip, black aggressively questions the pawn chain and opens lines for counterplay. Opening the center with this capture offers immediate diagonal pressure, but potentially weakens white's pawn structure and allows black counterplay. Reclaiming the center with the pawn reestablishes black's central pawn presence and opens lines for the pieces. Trading queens simplifies things dramatically, pushing us towards a simplified middle game where piece activity and pawn structure become paramount. Reclaiming the d-file with the rook sets up potential pressure and prepares for piece development, a crucial step after the queen exchange. Opening the h-file, white aggressively claims a central pawn, creating immediate tactical possibilities against black's slightly exposed king. Developing the knight to c6 reasserts pressure on the center and prepares to contest the open c-file, creating active counterplay. Repositioning the bishop to a7 targets a potentially weak pawn and prepares to contest open files. This move reinforces the d5 square, preparing to challenge white's central influence and gain breathing room for the knight. Anchoring the rook to the open file, white seeks to pressure black's isolated queenside pawn and prepare for a central advance. Exchanging the rook consolidates material and initiates an endgame transition, simplifying the board for black. Unlocking open files for white's remaining pieces, this king repositioning asserts its presence in the center. Developing the queenside under pressure, aiming to gain space and activate the rook. Developing the knight to a more active square, anticipating a potential knight outpost on d4 and preparing for king safety. Developing the bishop to this square activates it on the long diagonal, eyeing potential weaknesses while preparing for queenside expansion. Relocating the monarch to a more secure central square avoids any potential back-rank threats and prepares for pawn advances. Reclaiming the d-file, the rook aims to solidify black's central presence and prepare for potential pressure. Rerouting the knight to secure control of the d2 square, while preparing to contest the open d-file promises increased central influence. The knight embarks on a winding journey, aiming to redeploy to the queenside and potentially pressure white's isolated c-pawn. Securing the b3 square with the knight aims to support a future pawn advance on the queenside, potentially gaining space. Emboldened by central control, black aggressively pushes the f-pawn to disrupt white's bishop pair and open lines. Opening the c-file creates immediate pressure, potentially forcing pawn weaknesses or an awkward piece retreat. Opening up the b-file presents new attacking avenues for the knight, aiming to disrupt white's central control. Opening the c-file will now be paramount for infiltrating black's position. Opening the queenside for your pieces to develop offers counterplay and aims to dismantle white's pawn structure. Consolidating the knight's position, this repositions it for potential central control or a flank assault, aiming to bolster white's queenside presence. invigorating the knight's presence. This move immediately challenges white's central structure and aims to exploit potential weaknesses near the king. Solidifying the pawn's structure, this repositions the king for safety while preparing to contest the center. Pouncing on the open diagonal, this knight aims to disrupt white's pawn structure and create chaos, threatening a fork. Sacrificing the bishop to break open the kingside pawn structure and disrupt black's coordination feels risky. Recapturing the bishop with the knight instantly unpins your pieces and repositions it to a central outpost, creating threats along the d-file. Seeking to exploit the isolated d-pawn and create passed threats on the queenside. Initiating a diagonal attack, black's bishop eyes weak squares on the queenside, preparing to exploit white's uncoordinated pieces. Securing the isolated pawn with the knight initiates a potential endgame advantage, forcing black's pieces to react. A bold sortie into enemy territory, seeking to disrupt white's coordination and perhaps exploit weaknesses on the kingside. Safeguarding the rook and solidifying the central pawn structure are the priorities here. Unleashing a diagonal threat, this check forces white's king into a cramped, vulnerable position, disrupting its defensive structure. Securing the king's escape route is paramount after that cheeky knight sortie. Exploiting the exposed king, black ignites a tactical fireworks display, hoping to unravel white's defenses. Securing the bishop's outpost prevents knight infiltration while eyeing potential pawn breakthroughs. Repositioning the bishop to create a new axis of attack, forcing white's pieces into a reactive posture. Sacrificing the bishop simplifies to a more manageable, albeit still tricky, endgame. A surprising maneuver, forcing a queen trade and opening lines for the knight's aggressive foray, fundamentally altering the pawn structure. Unlocking tactical possibilities, this knight maneuver directly challenges black's queen and opens crucial lines for white's pieces. A bold recapture, igniting intricate piece play and a fight for central control. Unleashing central pawn majority, this advances white's endgame advantage. Seizing the exposed white king creates immediate attacking chances with the knight's newfound central influence. Securing the queenside pawn structure becomes paramount for white's development and potential to exploit the open file. Unleashing a royal fork, this checks the king and eyes the rook, creating immediate tactical complications. The king boldly ventures into the heart of the action, seeking to unify his army against the encroaching black knight. Securing the rook's outpost on d6 stabilizes black's queenside pawns and prepares for potential counterplay. Opening that queenside for potential piece activity,